Hey, so in the comments of my most recent video, someone asked me about the fact that, I have kind of changed the way I feel about transition and testosterone since my earlier videos. And, I hadn't thought about that at all, so I went back and watched my earlier video and, wrote up my responses to watching it in real time, and thought I would make kind of a pros cons list revisited or kind of like a response to my earlier videos. The first thing that I noticed was that so that was 2 years ago when I recorded those early videos talking about how I didn't know how I felt about my gender identity, and I was identifying as trans at the time, but more genderqueer. I wasn't sure if I wanted to transition, and I was pretty comfortable at that point with the idea of partial transition, which I've been on T for over a year and I don't plan on going off of it, so I have changed a lot. The first thing that I noticed about the video was I was like, wow, I look so different. My neck was so small, and I was tiny, and I had a very unfortunate haircut, I think, because what happened was I dyed my hair black and then uh, let my roots grow out. I was very lazy back then. So, the pros that I talked about, and I didn't focus too much on the pros back then, were having a deep voice, facial hair muscles, a masculine face, passing, and no periods. And I would still consider those pros. I think that back then I was really concerned about passing and really concerned about occupying a space that I would be comfortable in. Something that I talked about later on in the video is that I don't feel male, and to be an androgynous female-bodied person is safer than being an androgynous male-bodied, or people assume you're male-bodied person. Um, Particularly, I was thinking about I came out of the lesbian community, and being a lesbian, I found at my own high school was safer than being a gay man. I think that the ways that they're discriminated against are different. For instance, I faced a lot more sexual harassment as a lesbian than physical harassment or name calling or anything like that. So I was afraid of not passing or entering a kind of um, place where I would have to let go of that anchor of being female bodied or to a certain extent female identified. I was afraid of what would happen. I mean, how would I be treated? I was also afraid of having to tell everybody. Transition is really public and it is very difficult to hide. When I came out as a lesbian, I did not have to tell my extended family. I did end up telling them, but nothing forced me to because it really never came up. I knew my transition would come up, and that scared me. So that was kind of what was going on in my head then. The cons I talked about were health risks, the fact that it was irreversible. I was very unsure. My ideal self was androgynous. I was anxious about body hair, the awkwardness of transition, coming out to my grandparents, how it would affect my girlfriend, and things like that. It's interesting, I'm not with the same woman that I was with back then, and I don't think I would have been even if it hadn't been for my transition because I was 19. And I don't think most relationships that people have when they're 19 last. I mean, some do, but this particular person, just looking at where we are now, I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't have worked. We were not compatible, and I found. I think that on some level I was worried if the two of us broke up I would never find anyone again, and I am with someone who accepts my male identity and transition, so that is not an issue in my life right now. Um, I I was worried about coming out to my grandparents, which is funny because they took it very, very poorly at first and very, very well later. At first, when I called them before I said I was going to start testosterone, they said, "We're never going to call you Zach. That's silly." They weren't mean. They're from the South. They're very polite. Um, but in a polite way, in a kind of passive aggressive way, like, no, this is not going to happen. Now they are super accepting because they saw Oprah. and found out that it is something I can't help. And I'm like, well, thanks, Oprah. Um, and transition has been awkward. I call my blog, and it was really awkward, and that is because it has been so awkward, and I have a lot of social anxiety, and so it's played into that. The fact that it's irreversible is still scary. I mean, that is scary about anything. And I am the type of person, and this comes exactly from my parents, they are like this too, who doubts everything. I mean, my dad married my mom, and the day afterwards, he was like, should we have gotten married? I mean, that is how I operate. My parents, by the way, have been married for over 20 years, so it worked for them. But yeah, I mean, I still think, did I go to the right college? Am I making the right choices now? I am a self-doubter. So that was one reason that was huge on my mind, and it is a huge decision. But I thought about it for a long time, and I really came to a decision that I feel confident about. So yeah, I sometimes still doubt it, but not very much and not seriously. I mean, the same way I doubt anything. But the irreversibility and everything, the only thing that made me feel better about that was just time and really thinking hard about it, talking to a therapist, getting a second opinion. I went to like two different doctors, two different therapists. I really thought about this, and I read a ridiculous amount of books about gender identity transition. I really explored my options, and that did make me feel better. Health risks. I don't know why I stopped worrying about this. Probably because I talked to doctors about it, and they were like, "Yeah, I mean, there's health risks, but it's not a big deal." And I still kind of think about that. But then I also think, there are health risks to. I'm a really, really picky eater. There are health risks to that. There are health risks to everything. I don't know. I'm an anxious person, and for some reason, that doesn't really stress me out. I don't know about that. The body hair. I mean, I feel like, when you have a really clean room, and I'm also OCD, or at least have very strong OCD tendencies. I guess it depends on what therapist you talk to. But when I have a room, it's clean, and someone puts something down in my room, I freak out. But when my room is just messy, it's like, all right, it's messy. And I feel like the same way about body hair. At first it was like, I am hairless. If I get hair, it's gonna look so bad. But now that I'm really hairy, I'm like, yeah, another hair, whatever. I stopped caring about it. So, I don't know if other people feel that way about their bedrooms being messy, but that's how I feel. The fact that I don't feel male, I think deep down I identify as genderqueer in the sense that I don't see myself as completely male. I don't see myself as completely female. I think I'm a very feminine man. I identify kind of as femme, all these things, but the way that I present my gender to the outside world is very male. And this is not because I'm like faking it or anything. It's just that I I feel most comfortable dressing this way. This is a traditionally male way of dressing. However, my behavior is is often unmasculine, according to whatever someone considers masculine. The way society views masculinity. And I'm reflective about gender, and all these things. And for some reason, somehow, I have reconciled that being a male bodied genderqueer individual is what is right for me. And I mean, I don't really identify as genderqueer outrightly because of the way I've kind of reconciled it. I just think of myself as trans, and I feel like I will always feel trans, and it changes day to day. But a lot of times, I don't feel like an average guy. I don't know. It's complicated. It's really complicated. I guess I don't really have a simple identity, and so I just say I am a queer man because my masculinity is queer, my gender is queer, my sexuality is queer, but overall the package that people see every day, the person that I am is just sort of me and male. I would prefer male pronouns. I have a male name. I wear men's clothes. All those things. So it becomes I'm a man, but I'm queer. I'm not just jumping out of one um, box and into another. I don't know. It's complicated, but I'm male, kind of. Um, and being on T has not really affected my gender identity. I guess I've just sort of, once I made the decision to start T, there was less anxiety surrounding my gender identity, and I just sort of figured things out for myself, and I'm kind of more quiet about it because I'm comfortable and I'm living my life the way that I'm comfortable. But the thing that I really wrote down um, is that the ability to go on T and know I could go off it at any time is what made going on T okay for me. And that is what I got out of that old video and how where I am now is that I was anxious because I thought, what if I start T and it's not right for me? What if I look like a completely different person? What if I don't like my body? What if I feel all these things and I'm stuck? And once I started testosterone, I realized like this isn't scary. This can end at any time and it's going to be okay. And that is what I needed was to feel like I had a little bit of control over my transition, that I had a little bit of a say in things, that it wasn't completely irreversible in that sense. And partial transition made transition okay for me. If it hadn't been an option, I might not have transitioned because I would have been so scared of stepping into a machine, coming out a completely different person, and being, that's how transition kind of seemed to me, even after all the books I'd read. It seemed like instant, even though I'd watched all these videos, because it just, it seemed like so magical and impossible and scary. And being on testosterone showed me, like, this is going to be okay. It continues to be okay. And I know that if I ever feel uncomfortable with my transition, I can go off of testosterone. And that is reassuring to me because I'm a self doubter. So I think that is kind of where like that journey led me. I didn't make a lot of videos about from there to my decision to go on T, but part of it was I had all the self doubt, and then I went to another therapist rather than my usual one, and she was like, "Oh yeah, this is a clear cut case," And talking about my gender with her and a lot of things made me realize like, okay, I'm not just imagining this. Like this is real. Other people feel this way. It's going to be okay. And so that was part of it. And then meeting people online who identified as genderqueer or not completely 100% male who transitioned, and I was like, okay, all right, I can do this, and I don't have to be a jock, and I don't have to be, this really heteronormative man and do this. And that did make me feel more comfortable. Right now, I have no plans to go off of testosterone. I did have top surgery, and that's another thing. I mentioned I didn't want to have top surgery in that old video, and one major reason I didn't want to have top surgery was because it scared me, because I have a phobia of needles, and it was like just not going to happen. And I went through with it, and I think that partially, like going through with that, showed me like if I want this more than I am afraid of needles, then that said something. And when I got blood drawn to get T, it was like I want this more than I'm afraid of needles. This clearly is a thing. And I've continued to want it more than my fear of needles, or more than my social anxiety, more than my discomfort and awkwardness with people. And so it continues to be the right decision for me. So that's kind of where my thought process was in transitioning. And yeah, quite different than that old video.